Well, hello, welcome back. Today we're going to start a brand new chapter. We spent several weeks, I believe we spent 4 weeks on our prior chapter, 1 Timothy chapter 4, a lot of content in that. Today we're going to start the next to last chapter, 6 chapters in this letter, chapter 5, next to last chapter. Now, we're going to begin a new topic, and we're going to cover a lot today. I almost divided this up into 2 separate lessons, but I really felt it was going to break the flow, and so we're just going to cover a lot in one day. In fact, we're going to cover the majority of this chapter today, and the general topic is going to be one of family. We're going to talk about the church family, but we're also going to talk about some very practical matters that I bet many of you can relate to in your day-to-day life. And that's going to be the topic here. Now, I'm not going to go back and do review today. However, I do want to just talk about framing this and think about the various types of content we have in this letter. This is, first of all, a personal letter. It's a personal letter to Paul, to his friend, to his colleague, to someone he cared a lot about. He even calls him a son, to Timothy, excuse me. But it's not just personal, because we also see from the beginning, we saw last time, we're going to see today, that he says, I command you, I charge you. He talks about speaking with authority. So besides there being some personal things, it's really, most of all, dominated by doctrine. Doctrine for the church, for then, as well as today. There's also a lot of encouragement. There's warnings. But there's some things related to specific groups. And so in chapter 3, it was a discussion of delineating some of the leaders in the church and their qualifications and their responsibilities. That was in chapter 3. And in chapter 5, he's going to talk about parts of the church family. So let's take a moment to think about family in general. You know, family dynamics in the church and in our individual lives can be complicated. We often see it portrayed in a way in which it's like the stereotypical Norman Rockwell painting. And there's nothing but smiles. There's nothing but encouragement. There's nothing but joy. And everybody's present. Everybody's there. In the real world, even for the happiest family, there can be dark days. And for some, frankly, the family is just flat out dysfunctional. Our members aren't even present or aren't there at all. So family can have different connotations. Same thing could be true of a church. We could have an image that there's these beaming, loving people. But people are all sinners. We all have our good traits and our bad traits, and sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated. So as we open this chapter up, he's going to introduce some members of the church family and talk about how that relationships should function. So just to read these first 2 verses, he says, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters in all purity. Let's take a few minutes to talk about this. You know, we could go back. I'm not, because I said we have a lot to cover, I'm not going to bring in a lot of other scripture here, but we could. It is common in scripture. It is, in many churches today, common to invoke these terms. Somebody might be called a brother or a sister. In some cases, even a father or mother. It's a scriptural thing to do. And it's not just the terminology, it's about the functioning of the church. God created the family unit. And that family unit can be applied in a church setting as well. Now, there are going to be some, and we talked about age a few weeks ago, but relatively older men. And it says don't rebuke them because they should be treated with respect. But I also want to talk about this specific, it's a very unusual word for rebuke, and when you're reading your English Bible, it may not be apparent because there's other places there are instructions about rebuke, which is correction, and sometimes correction is good. This is a very, very specific word used in the Greek, which is a particularly harsh term, almost a striking term, like a verbal lashing. So we can correct people. Sometimes we're told to correct with gentleness. Think about correction. Think about the times you've given or you've received correction. Somebody could say the same words. Some are more gentle. Some, even though they're correction, they're given in a way that can still be encouraging. Where some are just extremely harsh, lashing out. So we're not supposed, he said, don't verbally strike an older man. Instead, you want to be an encouragement. And so that's some good guidance, I would say, for fathers, but really for all people. Yes, part of our responsibility at times is to correct one another, but it should be done in an encouraging and a loving way. Our relationship with each other, I think of a particular scripture. I said I was going to bring in other scriptures, but one of my favorite from Proverbs is there is a friend that can be closer than a brother. In our church we should have deep friendships. They should be almost a brotherly type friendship, trusting. Think about, for those that have brothers or sisters, you can talk with them, or hopefully you can. We should have deep relationships in our church. I think of women as mothers, and I even remember what Jesus said on the cross. He wanted to say, behold your mother. You should take care of her. And just as hopefully you want to take care of your earthly mother, we should take care of the, again, we can debate the age, but the relatively older women in the church. And then the relationship between men and women who are younger should be in all purity. Until which time there is a special relationship where there may be two unmarried people and that it will become a marriage, but until that time it should be pure. So many of our relationships in our society today, it's almost like the whole society, things are frankly very impure. These relationships should be governed by purity. So we have these various people, operating and functioning in the church. But then, and this is where we're going to go into a deep dive today, the special case of widows. And it was relevant then, and it's relevant today. And I know many people who are dealing with the very same type of issues here. I know in our church today we have people that are impacted by this. So, of course, somebody's lost their spouse, their widow. It's a very painful thing. It's a very painful part of life when that happens. And he says, honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. So just like there was some meaning to that term rebuke, there's some meanings to this term honor. Honor is a term of respect. So there's the idea of showing respect. But we're also going to see in our passage today, honor is also financial support. There's no other way to say it. I got to be blunt here. It was also saying financial support. And just to share, I will share just a couple of passages here. We often share things like this in Mother's Day, Father's Day, but back in the Ten Commandments, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land the Lord is giving you. Reiterated in Ephesians, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. So it says, if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them show godliness to their own household and return to their parents. That means there is a family responsibility there, and this is not an isolated passage. If there are children or grandchildren, they should honor with respect. They should honor if it's needed, financially. And it says this is pleasing in the sight of God. Now, of course, they were dealing with some real issues in that church, as is always going to be the case, as it is now, as it will always be. We find ourselves, as a church, individuals find themselves in these situations, and it's a tough part of life. Well, then we got a really difficult passage. I should have said overall, I spent a lot of time on the passage this week. There's just a lot to think about in this whole chapter. But let's think about this one. I had to think about this for a while. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. But she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. How do we interpret this? Well, it is a sad thing. But we said here there are widows with children or grandchildren. There are some widows who don't have that. They're left completely alone. Now, this is kind of part of the paradox of life. Like when Jesus said the first will be last, the last will be first. I don't think anybody wants to be in that position, do they? It sounds like you're last. It sounds like you're alone. But if she truly sets her hope on God, and she continues in supplications and prayer, there's a blessing. She's totally dependent upon God. That person, though, who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. Now, what did that mean? Well, I tried to find out more about the word and everything, but it's like living for self. Doesn't necessarily mean you could be somebody that's well off, but doesn't have to mean just financially. It's a person who's just depending upon themselves. They're living really not for God, not for others. They're just living for their own self-indulgence in whatever capacity. So that means just because you're a widow, you still have responsibilities in your life in your old age, and it is to live for God. And none of us should be self-indulgent. None of us should be focused completely on ourselves. And sometimes we meant because I'm a widow, I should just focus completely on myself. And that's not the case. Then back to the family matters. I said there's a lot going on here. And by the way, back to the idea that this isn't just personal, but he uses this word command here. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Some versions, I think the King James said, worse than an infidel. So for widows or anyone else, there is an order of the responsibilities in which things should be done. Now, this is for widows, it's for the church, it's for families. So let's say it's a widow. Is there children or grandchildren? They have a first responsibility. It's something you're responsible for. Makes it clear. Or even for others. We get to the point where society, it's good to help people. Of course it's good to help people. But there's also the idea of balancing stewardship. We have a society, if we become a society where so many people are dependent, whether it be the church or the government or whatever, the first order of priority is for the family. Now, there's one last, and it's a long section, but I'm going to kind of wrap it up here because it's very detailed instructions and kind of a summary of all this. And we'll pull it all together. So I did admit, we've been going slower. I am covering a lot today, but I think it's kind of following the theme. Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband and having a reputation for good works. If she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, has devoted herself to every good work, but refused to enroll younger widows. I guess the immediate context is less than 60. For when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry, and so incur condemnation for having abandoned their former faith. I'll talk about that. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. For some have already strayed after Satan. If any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. Let the church not be burdened, so it may care for those who are truly widows. Let me highlight a few things. The idea of being enrolled is for financial support. Many churches, including ours, has a widow's fund. Enroll means get regular financial support, and it says it's for those that have, lived a faithful life. This is, but, be careful if somebody's younger. One, they could work, but what's it saying here? Abandoning their former faith, etc. Some, in their, desperate situation, in that church actually chose to marry somebody of means who was not Christian, just so they would have that financial support. And they actually left their faith to marry someone outside the faith. And that's condemned. It also says, as we talked about in an earlier passage about that self-indulgent life, and again we think about sins, but it says when you're idle, it says you're gossiping. The mouth is a member which can cause lots of harm. Spending their days not busy, but being a busybody. And they're not stealing, they're not committing murder, but they're causing a lot of damage with their gossip and their talk. And so there is a responsibility for widows. You're not off the hook. You have a duty to live a godly life, as everyone does. And then again, just to say this, I think for the third time, let the relatives care. Let the church not be burdened. And again, the church has to be a steward of resources, so it can care for those that are truly needy. Now, we've covered a lot today. I want to just try to put a few thoughts together. We've talked today about families. We talked about church families. And we think about how God has given us different ages, genders, responsibilities, and how we operate and interact with one another in the church. We have brothers. We have respect. We have fathers and mothers. We operate with purity. But there's also the longest part of the passage is the special cases of widows, just like people have to deal with this now. And for the individuals, it is an important responsibility. And it's not an easy thing to go through. My prayers are with you for those who are in that position. That this is a heavy burden. I talk with people. It's a very challenging responsibility, but it's pleasing to God. It's a good thing. We also have to think about the church, whether it is those with younger, whether it be widows, anybody with need. Many people can come to the church with needs. And it's important. We want to provide for widows. And we want to provide for those that are hungry. And we want to provide for those with children. Widows, orphans, all kinds of things. But the church also says there is a stewardship. And so there needs to be some rules set up. And for those that have family members who have provisions, that's part of the responsibility. To honor in word, honor in deed. But we show a lot of who we are by how we care for those in need. It's part of the family responsibility, and it's part of the church responsibility. Now, these are heavy things. I don't know if you're going through some of these things now, but I encourage you. I certainly don't want to tell you what to do. I've tried to go through the passage the best I can. I encourage you to reflect upon it, but that's part of the reason God has given us the Bible, to give us wisdom, to give us direction, with doctrine and with these very important practical matters of life.